Okay, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We're in Dearborn Public Library. We're thrilled beyond measure to be speaking with David Zucker and Jim Abrams about their book, Surely You Can't Be Serious, the true story of making, this true story of airplane. First, a couple announcements. The format for tonight we'll aim for about 45 minutes of conversation, and then we'll have a Q&A session. Well, 5, 10, we'll see about 10 minutes or so. And then the other thing is on December 12th, we'll have at 6:30 p.m. here at the Dearborn Library, Mr. Greg Harden, athletic counselor from the University of Michigan Athletic Department, will be here to talk about his new book, Stay Sane in an Insane World, How to Control the Controllables and Thrive. So please keep that in mind, and you can check our events calendar for any future events. So it's a great thrill to introduce Mr. David Zucker and Mr. Jim Abrams. I myself, and I know others, have enjoyed their work, definitely with the Airplane movie, with Naked Gun, with Hot Shots, with Scary Movies. The Scary Movies, they're still making me laugh after all these years, and I just want to say thank you. And also welcome.
Thank you. It's our pleasure.
So
can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Yeah. So when you're doing interviews, do you like when people say, "Hey, that's a good question"? Because if you do, we'd be happy to say, "Hey, that's a good question" every time you ask a question, and then in exchange, you could just say nice things about our book. What do you think? You want to cut it too?
Well, we could try it out. See how it
It's like a good deal to me.
well, yeah, I just first, the obvious question: how did you come up with the idea for this book?
I think that we were just thinking about, our families don't really know the story. And then a lot of other people didn't know the story either. And we thought it was kind of an interesting story. I mean, everybody knows the movie. And so we decided, why don't we set all this down? And it turned out that there were tons of interesting stories. And we had a guy named Will Harris interview dozens and dozens of people, crew, actors, who else? I mean, studio executives, and that we got a lot, and I found out a lot of stuff that I didn't know. So I think it was a good experience for all of us.
Yeah, it's we did David's right. I mean, we essentially did it so there would be a record because none of us had been married or had kids, let alone grandkids, when we made the movie, and we thought maybe someday they'd be interested, and let's see if we can write a book about it. So a couple of weeks ago, there was a book signing at a local bookstore here in Los Angeles, and actually my granddaughter, my 6-year-old granddaughter, attended, and she was there. And so we told the story about, wouldn't it be nice if our grandkids would get to read this book someday? And the next day, and I sort of got choked up talking about it because there she was there in real life. So the next day she asked her dad, my son, why does anybody care what Grandpa has to say?
And my brother and I have been wondering that for years.
You're right.
But then, well, speaking of young, your families in Wisconsin were very close. In fact, your dads worked together in real estate. Did you guys get the urge to be an entertainer, or when you're young, or did you think, oh, uh, I remember in the book you mentioned something about you put on skits when you're young, and did you get the urge to be an entertainer, or like, wow, this is fun?
I think our first idea was to get into real estate together. But the the Abrams family would come over to our house for dinner, and Jim and Jerry and I would end up in our basement rec room, and we'd be playing ping pong and making each other laugh. And I think that's the first time we kind of had this early bond that we had something in common. And then after college, that's when we started the theater.
It's especially when it became clear that we weren't very good at anything else.
Well, I think what Jim is saying, I mean, we grew up in a high school where there were a lot of funny people, and there were at least 5 to 10 guys who were funnier than we were, but they were just able to find jobs after graduation. And we just took the humor seriously, I guess, and just developed a theater which we called Kentucky Fried Theater.
David, have you told the Copper Dome story?
Yeah, I told it. I've been telling it, but Jim is talking about this kind of unique humor that we had at Shorewood High School. It was the first suburb north of Milwaukee, and it had this very unique classroom that was built on top of the 3rd floor. It was had a domed ceiling, but the drawback was that the acoustics weren't good. So that what they did was the administration hung a big American flag across the top of it. And so one day Jim's class had a substitute teacher, and the substitute teacher asked, well, how do you usually start the day? So Jim's friend Pete Prusing said, well, we always say pledge allegiance to the flag. So Pete Prusing immediately lies down on the floor on his back, looking up at the flag, and the whole class laid down just all at once. They knew to do that, and then the teacher did too.
Oh my God.
And it's a true story. It really happened, and so somehow this is who we grew up with.
Yeah.
Well, you went to Madison. You were in University of Wisconsin, and you started the Kentucky Fried Theater. Did you want to tell the story of how you came up with that name?
I think Jim is the only one who knows that story.
My recollection, I guess we put it in the book. We were a few, David and Jerry and I and Dick Chudnow, who was another partner at the beginning with us, had made a bunch of videotapes, and we wanted to show the videotapes in some sort of theatrical area in some way, so the whole audience could watch them. And we were at a restaurant chatting about that, and across the street was a Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant. So we said, why don't we just call the theater Kentucky Fried Theater? And so we did. We opened a theater in Madison and showed our videos, and along with some live on stage kind of improvisational stuff. And that was our origin. That's where we learned how to do funny things.
And it was the biggest thing we could do with the money we had. I think it was a combined investment of like $800, split among four guys. And there was 70 seats, and we built a little stage, and there was a piano, but we got a great reaction. So that's when we decided to move the show to LA. We
actually used to charge an entrance fee. A ticket it was $1 a ticket.
Oh, wow. And you went to University of Wisconsin football games, and you kind of curious when the football was kicked. They didn't have nets at the time between the goal behind the goalposts, and
Right.
you do commentary as the ball would go up and up and up throughout the stadium, or what happened to it. Uh, uh, did you have any good stories from that, or?
One thing that we were able to do with the money that we did make from $1 a ticket was to buy what was called then a porta pack, and what now you can fit into, I mean, into your cell phone. This took a gigantic machine, reel-to-reel tape that you put on your back, and then a big camera that went over the shoulder. But at least it was portable, whereas the previous equipment wasn't. So that we took that to the football game, and when, as you said, when they kicked the football, the people in the end zone, rather than throw it back, would throw it back up, and then over the end. This was more typical in Wisconsin of.
Yeah.
Very
And
Italians.
the police would try to stop the kids
The
from
ushers,
stealing
yeah.
the football. So after they got the football up and out of the stadium, they pass it up and up and up out of the stadium. So then we interviewed some of the kids who took the football, and we interviewed the policemen who tried to stop them, and it was all just a lot of fun.
And ignoring the game.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
it was more exciting than the game.
Yeah.
Now, you talked about moving the theater to LA. Were you excited? Were you apprehensive? Were you nervous? What was going through your mind?
We got a great reaction from the show. We were sold out every night. And so we weren't nervous about how the show what reaction it would get, because the new show that we were going to do in LA was a combination of two shows. So it was really the best of. And so we had to decide whether to go to either Milwaukee or New York or LA. But the Tonight Show had just moved with Johnny Carson to LA from New York. So we really moved to LA hoping we get onto the Tonight Show and be discovered.
And eventually we actually did get onto the Tonight Show. And
Discovered.
yeah, but the first night when Johnny Carson was there, they ran too long. So they invited us back a second night, and Joey Bishop was the guest host. And he was this kind of dour guy anyway, and he'd never heard of us or anything. And so his introduction to our group, Kentucky Fried Theater Group, was to the Tonight Show audience in studio and nationwide was, well, I've never seen these kids before. I understand they're from Wisconsin and they must be scared to death. Please welcome Kentucky Fried Theater. And then we came on and we did these skits, and
skits that were, gangbusters in our little theater, but on TV didn't necessarily come off.
yeah. And up until just the last few years, every time I go back to Milwaukee, I have to apologize to the people who stayed up late that night.
Twice.
Well, the theater, the building that you got, it was on Pico Boulevard, just like a mile away from 20th Century Fox Studios.
Less than that. It was 2 blocks away.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I love some of the titles of your shows, Beating a Dead Horse. And one time you built, David, you're very good with building things, so you built a nose. And,
I think the control room guy built a nose, but we called the show My Nose because we wanted to get the listing in the LA Times weekly calendar section as My Nose Runs Continuously. So that was about the level of humor at that time.
And we actually did build a nose, a huge nose,
Yeah.
right over the box office. And when people came up to buy their tickets, we dripped water from the nose.
And and rigged up a speaker, had, you know, all nostril sneezing sounds as
Yeah.
well, sprayed out on people.
Well, Stephen Stucker joined your group there at this time, and can you talk about how unique and how talented a person he was?
Well, the guy, go ahead, Jim.
All right. So we had a pianist in our show in Madison, but he didn't want to move with us out to California. So we, as soon as we got out to, because having a piano on stage and having the pianist be part of our show was an integral part of the show. So when we got to California, we put out word for, does anybody know somebody who can play piano in our show? And we actually brought the piano from our show in Madison out to California, and the word got out. And then one day, while we were building the theater and the piano was covered with a tarpaulin, this guy pulls up to the theater. And we had never, at least I don't think, and I don't think David or Jerry had ever at that point known an really outed gay man. And this guy pulls up and gets out of his Volkswagen, and he's got this gold lame shirt with all this jewelry and leather hot pants thongs and sandals strapped up to his knees and stuff. And he came in and he introduced himself, and he was outrageously funny, like a whole nother level of funny. And then he took the part, we said, here's our tarpaulin, our piano, and he took the tarpaulin off the piano and started to play. And it was as though the piano was levitating. We'd never heard anybody play piano like that ever. And it turns out he was from Cleveland, and he had been a soloist with the Cleveland Symphony Orchestra before he moved out to California and tried to get into show business. So, and he was just the most marvelous, brilliantly talented guy. And he wound up being not only kind of the star of our show, but a big part of Airplane.
Because his personality and character played great against, you know, the stoic Robert Stack and Leslie Nielsen and Lloyd Bridges.
Yeah, he was like a nice counterpoint with his interjections, like how he described the airplane as a
right. And we never wrote lines for Stephen. We had the press conference set up, and we called him up on the phone and we asked him the questions. We said, okay, what kind of plane is it? And he went right in without missing a beat. He said, oh, it's a big, pretty white plane with wheels and red stripes. It looks like a big Tylenol, just like that. And that's exactly how it is in the movie.
Yeah. So your show is well received. You're getting great notices, and you start thinking about, hey, maybe let's make a movie or get into movies. And do you want to make a promo reel, and a 10-minute promo reel that you could show around town, skits from the show, to be like a calling card. And you get introduced to John Landis, and you get how did that work out? Were you probably reflect?
Well, actually, the sequence of events was just a little bit different. We did realize we didn't want to be performers forever, and
we weren't doing great on TV.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then John Landis did come to the show and said, why don't you guys make a movie from your show? And we said, how do you make a movie? And he says, we need a script. We said, how do you write a script? And he went to his car and he was 21 at the time, and he got the script out of the trunk of his car, that was American Werewolf in London. And so he said, just follow this kind of format with dialogue and descriptions and everything, and just write your show in that format. And then we did, and couldn't raise any money to make it. So we decided with John's help to make 10 minutes of Kentucky Fried Movie. In other words, 4 little skits from Kentucky Fried Movie, and use that to sell the rest of the screenplay, which wound up being Kentucky Fried Movie, which eventually led to us being able to make Airplane.
Yeah, yeah, and then it took a long time. You put in a lot of work to. That was the great thing about the book. It shows how you put in a lot of work on the script for Airplane.
We actually, when we decided to stop doing the show, we actually the first movie idea we had was Airplane. So we wrote a version of that, and when that didn't sell, that's when Landis came in and said, "Why don't you make a movie of your show?" We did that. Then we went back after Kentucky Fried Movie, rewrote the Airplane script, took that around to the studios, and still every studio turned it down. And except one. There was one guy named Michael Eisner, who was the president of Paramount, and he heard about the script and had us into his office, and they ended up buying the script and eventually putting us on as directors. After, they reluctantly, they didn't want us to, because it was why Airplane was so hard to pitch, because it was a comedy without comedians, and we wanted to direct it, first-time directors, and there were 3 of us. So this was a big steep cliff to climb.
We got the idea for Airplane because we used to leave our video recorder when we were doing the theater. We'd leave our video recorder on at night because that's when the silliest commercials would come on and the easiest ones to lampoon, that we could lampoon during our show. Well, one day we got to work and we had recorded this movie called 0 Hour, which is a 1957 melodrama starring Sterling Hayden and Linda Darnell and Dana Andrews. And it was Airplane, the story of a guy with PTSD who has to get on a plane, and there's food poisoning on the plane, and the pilot gets sick, and the guy has to land the plane. So we just started watching 0 Hour over and over, and we just added our jokes to their various very serious plot. There's actually a line in 0 Hour, sort of the iconic line that says, we not only have to, stewardess, we not only have to find someone who can land this plane, but who didn't have fish for dinner.
Yeah.
And there's another line which we took exactly, where the stewardess character in 0 Hour says, "I can't live with a man I don't respect." And that we took right from the thing. And
yeah, for years, everybody assumed that David had written that line, not that we got it from 0 Hour, based on all of his relationships with a number of different women.
Well, I in preparation for the talk, I took a look. We have a copy of 0 Hour here at the library, and I took a look at it, and it's a good movie.
Yeah,
Good B movie.
it's a structured movie with 3 acts and good character development. It actually worked, although a little bit hackneyed, but it was very serious, with no joke, no sense of humor to it at all, which we thought was ideal.
yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's like you look at it and it's like, wow, there's an opportunity for a joke. There's an opportunity for a joke.
Right. There actually is a line. One of the air controllers really says, "It looks like I picked the wrong week to quit smoking." And the pilot actually, in 0 Hour, hands the little boy a little toy plane and says, "Have you ever been up in a plane before?" So a lot of those ideas we got from Zero Hour, and we just kind of added our twisted.
But that you, in the book, you really credit how Michael Eisner really made the difference for you, how he really supported the movie. He was in front of it, and even Jeffrey Katzenberg
Right.
was really
Yeah.
supportive too.
I think many stories of filmmakers, going through the studio system, seem to portray the studio executives as morons and boobs, and they, we had the opposite experience at Paramount. They were really supportive and smart, and were willing to let us direct. I mean, they let us direct with the proviso that they put on their own guy as executive producer, which was Howard W. Koch, who had been a past president of the studio and even president of the Academy. And the other clause was that they could fire us after 2 weeks. So, the first day of filming, which we tell about in the book, was very wisely scheduled by our producer, John Davison, as Bob Hayes saying to Leslie Nielsen, Shirley, you can't be serious. And Leslie says, I am serious, and don't call me Shirley, which is said by anybody other than Leslie Nielsen would probably be just another dumb pun. I mean, I think Chevy Chase and Bill Murray are funny guys, but it wouldn't have been the same had we used comedians for those lines.
Well, yeah, Paramount was like, hey, why don't you use them? But
yeah, right. And they were, but the first day, the reaction to the first day's dailies was the room just broke out. Everybody fell off their chairs laughing. And then the dailies became so crowded every day that they had to add a second screening, a second room and a third room to it, because everybody from the lot crowded in to see our dailies, which
when the book first came out a month or so ago, David was really wanted to hand deliver a copy to Michael Eisner because he was so grateful for how helpful Eisner had been at Paramount. And so David was very aggressive about tracking him down so he could give Eisner a copy of the book. And a couple of weeks later, after the charges of malicious trespassing and stalking were
dropped.
Yeah, then he actually did go to
Yeah, and I tracked him down. He was living in a homeless tent in downtown LA. So, the book is full of surprises.
Oh yeah.
Read it.
I mean, even the good times run out for people. But Howard Koch, he sounds like the kind of guy everybody should know. It was that kind of guy. He was just full of wise advice,
right,
described in the book. And yeah,
he was our mentor, reminded us, of our own fathers. I mean, without the beatings, but we were so grateful to have Howard there, and he helped us maneuver through the studio minefields. I mean, as great as the studio was, they still came up with wacky ideas for the Ted Stryker, like Barry Manilow, and
Barry,
and even Bruce Jenner. And somebody was behind this, getting Bruce Jenner to read, and he came in 3 times, and we couldn't figure out why. But he really wanted the part. The first 2 times he came in to read for Ted Stryker, and the third time he came to read for Elaine. So, and
we realized there might be deeper feelings involved in just wanting to be an actor.
Right.
Well, but you approached. You approached.
I don't know if your audience is enjoying us but we're
Oh,
still.
they're enjoying
We are.
it.
We're really enjoying this.
We're enjoying ourselves
Yeah, exactly.
really a lot.
They're smiling. They're smiling. They're enjoying it.
Yeah.
Your approach, you had a certain idea in mind to have serious or actors that played serious parts, and like you approach Charlton Heston, you approach Jack Webb, Robert Stack, all these Lloyd Bridges, all these people that have serious roles, but some people got it, but some people didn't. What were some of the stories from that?
Well, Peter Graves, when he first read the script, as he explained, he threw the script across the room and said, "This is the worst piece of trash I've ever read," and in the worst taste of any script that he's read. But it was probably because he read his own part first. Probably appeared to him that he was playing a funny pedophile. So but Howard again came to the rescue and convinced Peter to come in and meet with us. And so we convinced him that we weren't the drugged out weirdos that he expected, and he signed on to play Captain Over.
And it turns out when at the first screening of the movie, Peter and his wife were sitting right behind us, and they were hysterical. They just couldn't have laughed any harder. It's as hard as I've ever heard anyone laugh at that movie.
I think partly out of relief, I think.
Yeah, I get
God, that was a stretch to sign on for that.
And did you had a hard time convincing Robert Stack to play, right? Or was that the case?
Yeah, we had called up Robert Stack back in 1975. And when we first wrote the first version of the script, and we called his agent and we said, we want Robert, we wrote this movie, we did Kentucky Fried Theater, and we wrote this movie, we want Robert Stack to be in the movie. So the agent said, "Is this a go picture?" And there's a big pause, and we said, "What's a go picture?" And so, I think then he said, "Come back when you have the money." So that's how focused we were on Robert Stack. There was nobody else that we ever considered to play that role.
And he eventually got it. He was probably, it sounded like the first, he said, we're the Stooges.
right. Yeah. But one of the great, I don't know, so one of the interesting things that happened when we were filming is there was a guy back then, his name is John Biner, a stand-up comedian, who used to do an imitation of Robert Stack, which was kind of Robert Stack on steroids. And that's sort of what we had in mind. And so when we started to film with him, he was just doing regular Robert Stack. And so Jerry, David's brother, Jerry Zucker, did an impersonation of John Biner's impersonation of Robert Stack on steroids for Robert Stack. And that's how he wound up playing the movie.
And Leslie Nielsen, he again was known for serious parts like many TV shows and Captain for the Poseidon Adventure. Was he easy to get on board?
He was. I mean, the hard part about Leslie Nielsen was he wasn't the first choice. There's 4 actors who turned us down for that role. And when we finally, we couldn't get anybody to do that we thought was, had the gravitas and seriosity that we needed. We remembered there was this guy who played the captain of the Poseidon Adventure. We didn't even know what his name was, but we said that guy had been in hundreds of serious movies and TV shows. So we came to our casting director and said, we want Leslie Nielsen to play the doctor. And our casting director had already been brave enough to put his name on a comedy that starred Robert Stack and Peter Graves and Lloyd Bridges. So and he said, Leslie Nielsen is the guy you cast the night before. And we were already 3 weeks away from the start of principal photography. So, but we had him in, and then we found out later that Leslie told his agent, I don't care what they offer me, I paid them to do this movie. So Leslie got it from the get-go.
Well, he was a virtuoso with the fart machine.
Yeah. He had this little Framus that he carried in his hand, and when he squeezed it, it made a fart sound. And he had it with him all the time, no matter where he went, even when we were filming. So he'd be doing a scene with another actor and squeeze off a fart, and the other actor would laugh. And we were with Leslie for a number of years, and even sometimes we'd go with him on live talk shows, TV talk shows, and the interviewer on the live TV talk show wouldn't know he has a fart machine, and he'd rip one off right during the middle of an interview and kind of rooch around uncomfortably, and the interview didn't know how to handle it. It was really fun.
Yeah, I guess from the book he described how Bob Hayes couldn't sometimes keep a straight face, keep his lines going, and how he'd go work next to Julie Haggerty, and he'd cut a fart, and he says, "Oh, Julie," and she'd be blushing like, "Oh boy."
She tells that story in the book, yes.
So how do three guys direct a movie?
Well, usually what happens is we start,
set up every shot, before we get to
and the camera.
Barry was the one who actually worked.
But it was hard. You had a hard time, with the studio, but you had a hard time with the Directors Guild because you couldn't convince them that to get that credit, the director credit, and you went round and round with them.
They had a rule in the Directors Guild that only one person could get a director's credit. So they said, we're not giving in on this. You have to pick one of you. And so there was no way we were ever going to pick one of us, because all three of us did direct it together. And so we went through several kangaroo courts with the Directors Guild, and they still refused. We were in the third week of filming, and Jerry went down to the LA City Hall and had his name legally changed to Abraham's initial N, Zucker's. And the Directors Guild computer spat out a card that said Abraham's N, Zucker's, Directors Guild. And when they found out about it, they were furious. But I think they were trapped. They had to, and if we actually went ahead and did the film with that director's credit, I think it would have been embarrassing for them. So they gave in.
We actually have their pictures, or a picture in the book, of the clapboard. They use it at the beginning of the shot, where it says scene and all that, and director Abraham's and Zucker's.
Well, it sounded like from the book that the actual filming process went very well, very quickly, quicker than an average movie.
Well, we had worked together for 10 years before that. So, and most of what's involved in directing happens before you get on the set. So the main thing is the script, and we collaborated absolutely on the script, and then casting is another big part of directing. Sets, costumes, special effects, all that stuff is before you get on the set. So when we get on the set, it's mainly just problem solving. So and then if we ever disagreed on anything, we would always vote. It was 2 out of 3, and that solved that. So there are very few disagreements, no arguments ever.
And when you think about it, because we are all of the same mind about virtually every aspect of the movie. The fact there were three of us makes the director 3 times more accessible.
So just got like three more questions. Can you describe how one guy's laughter in the executive screening on the Paramount lot help you edit the movie?
Well, we wanted to take the movie out as we always did after that, and in Kentucky Fried Movie, to a test audience. And but for Airplane, we couldn't do that. Eisner said we had to screen it on the lot for the executives first before it ever went off the lot. So we said, okay, but we said we got to recruit a full audience. We didn't want to screen the movie for 30 Paramount executives with their hands folded like that. So and no sense of humor. So but the audience recruiter for Paramount was incompetent and couldn't recruit anybody. So it got to be like 20 minutes till the start time of the movie, and we really had no audience, and all the executives were going to be sitting there. So we went out on Melrose and Gower Boulevards and tried to grab people off the line waiting to get into Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley. And so we roped them, and we managed to fill half the audience, but we don't know if English may have been the first language people. And so the movie starts, and the first half kind of did medium, and the second half was silence, except for one guy who was laughing. And so we ended up cutting the movie to that one guy, but it was a disaster.
We would tape the audience reaction, and that one guy's laughter would told us when to cut, or if to cut, or shorten a scene or a shot or something like that.
Yeah, you recorded the laughter. You
Yes,
did the screening,
exactly,
so you knew what to do.
exactly.
So when my friends and I at the time, we always made sure to stay for the end credits of the movie. Who came up with the idea of the funny end credits?
Well, it was always sort of our whole spirit is anything that people do seriously, we can't do seriously. And normally, end credits on movies are just done seriously. And it was just, 3 minutes of opportunities to do jokes. So that we actually inserted, like Tale of Two Cities and
Author of Tale of Two Cities, Charles
yeah,
Dickens.
author of Tale of Two Cities.
Yeah. And my favorite one, Jim, is on the left. It says Fories, and then a jolly good fellow on the end. Jim,
It's so stupid.
and somewhere in the book, we have elevated stupid to an art form. And that's an example of it. Another one that Jim and I have talked about is, when they say the doctor says these people have to be gotten to a hospital, and then Julie says, a hospital, what is it? And then Leslie says, it's a big building with patients, but that's not important right now. But then, Jim was pointing out to me, why would a doctor say a big building with patients? It's just so stupid. And I couldn't remember what we were thinking when we
can't either. But what I'm going to do next time this weekend when I see my grandkids or little kids, I'm going to say, do you know what a hospital is? And they'll probably say, a big building with patients. It'll be interesting to see what they say.
To the level of
Yeah,
a
right.
4-year-old. Yeah.
But final question. You guys are heavily involved in charitable work. And Jim, you mentioned with the Charlie Foundation, and David with the Tree People organization. Would you like to take a minute to talk about each?
Sure.
Yeah, I just, being from Wisconsin, I grew up on a street with, hundreds of trees, and there was a tree canopy. And when you get to LA, you realize that you really have to be proactive in planting trees and then caring for them. So I found out there was this organization in LA, very wonderful organization called Tree People. And so I joined it, and I became best friends with the founder, Andy Lipkiss. And I've been on the board since 1988. And now nobody from the original board when I was on it is still on it. I mean, I'm the longest serving board member in Tree People history. And for example, Andy Lipkiss made me the godfather to his son when he was born. And for the kid's first birthday, I bought him a toy chainsaw.
Yeah, and the Charlie Foundation, which is my foundation, is named after my son, Charlie, who's now 31, but when he was a baby, he had terrible seizures, and we couldn't control them. And none of the 6 or 7 pediatric neurologists we took him to were able to control the seizures. They tried all the available drugs and brain surgery, and nothing would stop his seizures. And so pretty much as an effort to figure out how he and the rest of my family was going to make it through this horrible time into a lifetime where he was supposed to have uncontrolled seizures, what they call progressive retardation. I went to the UCLA library. This is before there was anything online. And I found hiding in plain sight something called the ketogenic diet, which had been developed in the 1920s as an early therapy for kids with terrible, difficult to control seizures. But it's sort of fallen off the awareness of the medical professionals when drugs were invented. And so there was still a hospital, Johns Hopkins in the United States in the early 90s that had a ketogenic diet program with an experienced dietitian. And we took Charlie there and we started it on this diet. And at the time he was averaging about a dozen seizures a day. He was on 4 anti-epileptic medicines. And in 2 days, his seizures were gone. And in a month, he was off all his medicines. And at first there's this sort of euphoria, but then you take a look around and there's world epilepsy population, around 60 million people. Most of those people start having their seizures as kids. And minuscule, back then, Charlie was maybe one of a dozen people in the world who was on the diet for any medical purpose. So it became we started the Charlie Foundation to raise awareness of the diet and try to combat some of the many powerful forces other than good health that our medical professionals deal with.
Yeah, I know a healthy diet makes a difference. I have to eat gluten-free for health reasons, so I'm glad that it's worked so well. And
yeah, it's worked well for him and for now thousands of kids, and now they're starting to use it with other brain disorders, including bipolar dysfunction and even brain cancer and stuff. So it's been a journey. Yes.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you very much. We'll now go on to our Q&A part. Get some questions in here. Probably too many questions for the time. What is your first question?
On censorship, how was there any problems with censorship in regards to Autopilot or Julie Haggerty or in those 2 themes?
Did you get the question?
There were no problems with censorship. Maybe I'm just referring to in those days. In fact, there was no PG-13 category for movies. And so that happened a few years later when Spielberg needed a something between PG and R, and that's why they invented PG-13. But at the time of Airplane, it was just either PG or R. So we got a PG.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, over here.
What was the inspiration for using the city of Detroit in one of your best jokes in the movie?
Oh, that we actually used that earlier in Kentucky Fried Movie,
Yes.
where a guy's being tortured and they say, now take him to Detroit. Yeah.
That Detroit had been in the news a lot in the mid-70s for any number of things that were going haywire. So we kind of glommed onto that.
So let's take a look online here. Let's see. Do you have a favorite scene or line from Airplane?
I always think of, one of the jokes that I think plays great and is very simple is when Leslie says to the stewardess, "How are you bearing up?" And she says, "Well, to be honest, I'm scared. I've never been so scared. And besides, I'm 26 and I'm not married." And that's kind of one thing, it kind of comes out of nowhere. But then the other lady comes in and Leslie asks her, "How are you bearing up?" And she says, "Well, I'm scared. I've never been so scared, but at least I have a husband." So, and it's just that joke works so effortlessly and nobody has to try to be funny and it's all done in one shot. And I love that joke because it worked wonderfully 43 years ago, works today, and it'll work 43 years from now. So it's just timeless.
I think my favorite sort of varies from, especially since the book came out and I've been doing so much thinking about the movie, and it kind of varies from week to week. And I'll be just driving along somewhere and I'll start to laugh because I'll think about one of the jokes. But most recently I was thinking about at the end of 0 Hour, there's a shot of a fire truck with a fireman on the back with a Dalmatian. And so we just duplicated that shot and put a fireman on the back with a Dalmatian, and the Dalmatian barked. And we dubbed in the voice of a bloodhound barking. So when the Dalmatian, woo, so, I don't know, it makes me laugh.
Okay, another question, sir.
Yes. My question is, was there a moment where you met a celebrity or someone you idolized after the movie came out where it just hit you as like, wow, here's this person liking my work?
Well, there were two for me. I heard Gore Vidal loved the movie and said some amazing, very complimentary things about the movie, and he saw it 5 times. And so I happened to be in a restaurant, and Gore Vidal was sitting there with a couple of friends, and I waited till they kind of finished dessert, and I walked over and I introduced myself, and he just was bowing. Well, and the other thing I remember is I was at a Knicks game, and at halftime they had a special segment because I was doing press at the time for Police Squad, I think, or for one of the Naked Guns, and they had a place set us aside, and I spotted Woody Allen, and we always idolized Woody Allen more than anyone, more than even the Marx Brothers. And so I went up to Woody and introduced myself, and I started to tell him how much we loved his movies, but all he wanted to talk about was Airplane, and how when he first saw it, he saw it with the very famous New Yorker critic, Pauline Kael, and she hated it. And so he was telling me, he kept telling her, no, don't you think this is really funny? It's, it's good. And so it was great hearing that from Woody Allen, and I never forgot that.
Yeah, he always says every time it's on TV, he watches it.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have anything that I think my biggest thrills came from meeting Kareem and Ethel Merman. I mean, both of those meeting both of them for the first time was like heart stopping for me. And the fact that they liked it and I just got to shake their hands was phenomenal.
Yeah, let's finish with one more question. The question was how was Kareem chosen? But you had written the Murdoch part for another athlete.
Yeah, we wrote it for Pete Rose for some reason. And I guess that was the first concept that occurred to us. But as it happened, we were shooting Airplane during the summer, and Pete Rose was unavailable because he was either playing or managing baseball. So our second choice was Kareem, and that turned out to be totally fortunate for us.
And it's kind of all we had written in the script for Pete Rose was just 1 or 2 lines instead of a whole harangue like Kareem went through, because at the time we didn't Pete Rose hadn't been outed as the gambling kind of person he turned out to be. But it would have really been fun if we had known that and had Joey be able to confront him. What's the spread on the Dodger game today?
Well, we could talk for a long time, but we'll be closing up shop soon. So the audience definitely enjoyed it.
Hello?
And I want to thank you. I want to thank you very much because it's great talking with you guys. Movies make me laugh and make a lot of other people laugh. Thank you.
Thank you. It was
Have a
fun.
good night.
Good night.
Good night.